Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today's Monday. It is June the 16th. A little bit of a late start this morning. Didn't mean to make it like that, but it was kind of a long night. Something about being around a big crowd leaves me very anxious, almost always. And there's some really strange people that are out there in the world. I got to see them again. I forgot how close they are to me. It's only 30 minutes south to get down there and see all the weird folks that live in Austin. And so anyway, last night I was sleeping in about 1 o'clock in the morning or 1:30 in the morning. The ice maker decided to put out some ice. Very common thing. Why do we have such loud ice makers? Anyway, I woke up and grabbed a rifle because that's what I do. Not immediately. I woke up, looked around, wondered what the hell was going on. Couldn't shake the feeling that somebody might be trying to get into my house. And so I did a little patrol. Anyway, so I've got some bags under my eyes because we've got some kids that don't want to sleep either. That happens at 3 and then at 4:30 and so on. So here we are. We're a little bit late. Very, very strange weekend in every respect. We had assassinations in Minnesota. We had a shooting by a responder, like a Good Samaritan responder was a shooter and accidentally killed somebody while trying to stop a potential mass shooter in Salt Lake City. So all of that is strange. So political violence, some unrelated accidental violence, it sounds like, and then some other things that have been attributed to the politics of it, but it's hard to say what was what. Some people got run over and so on and so forth. Anyway, it's just a bizarre weekend full of strange people doing odd things. We're going to cover a lot of that. I've got a full palette full of things. I want to start actually off in Ireland. That's actually where we're going to go for the beginning of the show. But before we do, let's go ahead and get a sponsor read in here. We've got a good one, and this one actually relates to what happened. I actually did attend the No Kings rally down in Austin, so I got to see what was going on there. And you guys, I always try to be prepared when I roll into these places, and I wore my new Undertack modal briefs because I was pretty sure it was going to be gross and sweaty, and I was not wrong. It was absolutely disgusting out there. Not just the weirdos that are running around in Austin. I've got some great footage to show you guys, but additionally, like, it was hot and muggy and Austin-y and so on. So, let you guys know, summer's here, especially here in Texas. And when it comes with heat and humidity and discomfort and sticky things in places you don't want to be stuck up. Yeah, it's gross. That's why I've made the switch to Undertack. Like I said, I just wore them down there to that protest. Glad I did. They are the leading edge of premium comfort and function. Forget your old boxer briefs. Undertack was built for special forces operators in brutal conditions, probably nastier than you're dealing with. Their premium modal fabric wicks away 50% more moisture than cotton. It's naturally antibacterial, which means it doesn't stink. Keeps you cool and dry and chafe-free. I can attest to all of that. Whether you're crushing a workout or owning your day or hanging out with a bunch of wild libs, boomers and zoomers who are crying about dictators. They've also got a functional little hidden E&E pocket for cash or micro SD cards or a handcuff key, whatever keeps you ready. Maybe it's an almond if you're Steve Friend. Undertack is more than just boxer briefs. You can also explore their American-made battle weave socks. I've got a pair of those as well. I wore those down there to this protest, and they're 5 times stronger than normal merino wool. Rugged, and yet they've got still soft EDCs. These are your everyday carry t-shirts, hoodies, joggers, you name it. Everything right now is 20% off site-wide with that promo code KYLE20, K-Y-L-E 20. So that's easy. Very easy to remember. Go to undertack.com and use the promo code Kyle20. Again, undertac.com. Exceptional comfort guaranteed. Upgrade your gear, your mission, and your impact at undertac.com. Use promo code Kyle20 for the best deals. All right, let's dive in today. We got a lot going on here. Let's get it started. Oh, you guys in the chat are the best, and you are some snarky bunch too. There you are right there. Thanks for all of you who are joining us over on YouTube, and for those of like our regular crew over on Rumble. Someone said, Kyle's been late an awful lot today or this week, the last month. Wish I could be late to work. Well, you can too. All you got to do is not get paid for 14 months. Try to figure out if you can launch a podcast. Find some people that want to listen to what you have to say, and then start working for yourself. That's how we do it here. That's how you get to be late just a few minutes. I would rather have a higher quality product than not. So that's what we're going to do. And we're starting off with something that's kind of an international perspective. Masked rioters in Northern Ireland have attacked torched houses for a second night in a row. This actually goes back to Tuesday of last week. And I've been kind of sitting on this story, kind of watching it. I think it's relevant. I think it's worth knowing that there are people that are organically fed up with what's happening in the world as they see it. And some folks in Northern Ireland are experiencing that right now. They've been torching houses where so-called migrants lived, aka illegal aliens that have come into their country and are bringing different culture, not the culture that the folks of Ireland are expecting. And hundreds of these folks have started setting houses afire, fighting with cops, cars. It's not quite the same mob as you might expect. It's not the same people that are getting after it in America. This is a resistance movement. While it does look like there's a lot of grassroots mentally ill and very confused people. I had conversations down in Austin. They were generally nice people who seem to not have a grasp on actual facts. I like to find myself kind of I'm not associated with any party, so I don't have to fall in. The first thing that someone asked me was, who are you? And I said, well, I'm with an independent media organization. And they go, you're not one of those propaganda outlets, are you? And then the first thing that the man said to me was, I like to listen to the Midas Touch Network, which is a propaganda outfit. They are a hard left-leaning bunch of goofballs. I think that we cut more fairly here. And I think that what's happening in the United States, some of it is organic, some of it is not. What is happening in Ireland appears to be much more a reaction to what many of us have seen. And it's a small place where people are just fed up with this stuff. Officers in riot gear driving armored vans responded with water cannons, plastic baton rounds after being attacked with petrol bombs, that's fire bombs, scaffoldings, rocks, rioters knocking down nearby walls, just absolutely causing chaos because they're pissed. And they were pissed because they claim to be, these are racially motivated hate attacks, so saith the police there. But all of this stems from a couple of girls that were attacked by illegal aliens, by migrants, whatever the hell you want to call these people that have invaded the areas in the UK and Northern Ireland. The British government said that they are going to step up their patrols in there. Local media is saying that this is mostly teenagers. I don't think that's the case. I think some men have met their breaking point. And I wanted to just point it out that this is happening in other places. Yes, scaffolding. One of you is questioning. Yes, pieces of scaffolding are often dismantled like other things from construction sites. It's not always that people just stage pallets of bricks and so on. But there is a natural breaking point, and a number of people have reached it. A couple other things I wanted to cover from last week because we didn't get to them, and I think it's worth knowing. The DOJ said that the Milwaukee judge, whose name is, what is her name? Hannah something or other? She's kind of horrible to look at. Sorry, there's no other way around it. Her name is Hannah Dugan, Dugan. She was the judge that was seen helping illegals escape her courtroom and was taken into custody. DOJ said that just because you're a judge doesn't mean that you are immune from criminal prosecutions. She was arrested by the FBI on April the 25th. Federal prosecutors said that the judge should reject the Wisconsin judge's attempt to claim that this is a judicial immunity situation and that she should not be prosecuted for obstruction. That was the arguments being made. All people, in theory, are supposed to be subject to the law. I actually keep hearing this from the people on the political left, like no one is above the law. Except some people are above the law as long as they are illegal aliens. That seems to be their kind of rallying cry, and it's a weird take. Some people are above the law. They don't want to consider certain folks because they are protected status. You can have people like Jasmine Crockett out there making the argument. And at the same time, I also saw an article yesterday which came out from, I guess, the end of last week, talking about how the Proud Boys have filed a $100 million lawsuit against the DOJ, and they expect to see it settled. The left expects to see it settled. And their reasoning is because the Justice Department settled with Ashley Babbitt's family. Now, remember, Ashley Babbitt's family got slightly less than $5 million from the federal settlement fund for the death of a woman who was killed in a way that would not actually fall into a justifiable shoot. Not under any definition that I can mather. She did not represent an imminent danger of death or serious physical injury to anyone at that time. Now, Ashley Babbitt's scenario could have developed into a justifiable use of deadly force, in my estimation, but it didn't meet it when it happened, and we have it on camera. There's also some really troubling stuff that went on, including the radio traffic from Lieutenant Michael Byrd at the time, claiming that he was taking incoming rounds. He said that after shooting her, but there were no incoming rounds because nobody in that crowd, as far as we know, were armed except the law enforcement officers. So the argument is that this $100 million lawsuit, which was filed by Enrique Tarrio and several other Proud Boys, they were found guilty of seditious conspiracy and other crimes, including the fact that they were found guilty when Tarrio wasn't even in the area. Apparently, they think the case, this is according to legal analyst and former prosecutor Shan Wu, the case is legally unsound, but will likely have an excellent chance for a successful outcome because DOJ will likely settle it. That's the take they have. And that would come down to like roughly $20 million per person in this suit. I don't actually agree with that. And the reason why is that we know that Ashley Babbitt's suit at $5 million is less than some people get for spilling a cup of their own coffee in their own lap in state courts. It seems remarkably and terribly unfair. $5 million for the cost of a woman's life. She probably shouldn't have been there. But we're talking about a guy that had so many problems carrying on with a weapon, had probably no business being in that law enforcement field in the first place. There are a significant amount of just, what would they call, aggregating factors when it comes to Michael Byrd's use of force and the fact that he was carrying a gun in that space. Anyway, just be aware that everybody is subject to the law. Everybody should, in fact, deal with justice unless they are part of a preferred group. And I kind of want to go to this little clip that I had queued up of Jasmine Crockett. She wants to dismiss, certain people. And she would also like to just say, just because some illegal aliens are bad, and that was actually sort of the grand theme of this weekend in the No Kings movement. It was really a mixture. It didn't make a lot of sense, kind of like the argument Jasmine Crockett makes that some people did some dangerous things and therefore we shouldn't worry about them because they're the right kind of people. The things I saw were climate justice posters, whatever you want to call them. I saw people that were celebrating sexual diversity and their sexuality out loud, which seemed really important to them. There were a very small number of children there, like young children, because it seemed like most parents, grown-up parents, were busy not being there. And there was a couple of grandparents that looked like they were rocking around with some infants. That was kind of disturbing to me. But it was an outlandish small young people between like teenage and their late 20s. So your Zoomers, your Gen Zs. And then you had a huge chunk of boomers, people in like the 60 to 80 category. What you didn't see was a lot of people in their 40s and early 50s. You didn't see people of my age brackets, whether it be millennials or Gen Xers. It just wasn't represented there. And maybe that's because they had something better to do. Maybe because like when you have kids, you actually have to make a little bit of sense. You're used to having your statements questioned. I get mine questioned at the breakfast table by 7 and 8-year-olds. Like that's just what my kids do. They want to know the why. When you're in Congress, you don't have to explain the why. You can just say things that are nonsensical. I actually have an entire list of the logical fallacies, and they're almost all used by these people. Let's start with Jasmine Crockett kind of talking with silly glasses on about protected classes. Some people don't need to be evaluated.
And that has been killed. And if they've been killed by an immigrant, then God darn it, every single immigrant is going out and they are killers. And that is the problem. But they don't want to talk about white supremacy. I don't know how many hearings we going to have about the fact that there's been this one immigrant that killed this one person.
We're going to come back to the white supremacy thing because that was actually an argument that was made on CNN. I don't know if they've just decided like that's where the talking points are going to go. But in theory, Americans actually care a little bit about law and order and justice. They actually want to see some degree of fairness. The problem is that we've seen this kind of remarkable trend of partisanship out of our judiciary. This is the Article 3 judges. This is not your immigration judges. So NBC is citing a poll that Americans overwhelmingly want Trump to obey court rulings, but MAGA Republicans are split. 8 in 10 respondents believe that the Trump administration should not ignore federal court rulings if the White House doesn't like it, according to, of course, an NBC Decision Desk poll, which is like people who go to NBC News, just so you guys know. Now, what it doesn't say, and I wasn't able to find the actual question, is whether or not they mean a Supreme Court decision or whether or not we're talking about these district court judges that are representing the smallest part of the federal judiciary. The vast majority of American adults believe that the Trump administration must comply with federal court orders, although the president's strongest supporters are split on the issue. 81% of respondents said that if federal court rules the administration action is illegal, then the administration has to follow the ruling. Only 19% said they can ignore it. But this gets really tricky. Again, there is actually a current and soon to be hopefully settled Supreme Court case asking whether or not district court judges have the ability to impose injunctions across the entire nation. And I think if you flesh that out, should a judge in Minneapolis, should a judge in the District of Columbia be able to stop all executive actions across the entire nation and including internationally, I think you'd get a slightly different answer from these people. But again, we are talking about folks that are trying to craft it. This is NBC News. It's worth knowing. The poll was conducted ahead of the Supreme Court's traditional quote unquote ruling season, which is coming out, where one of the highest profile things is a discussion about birthright citizenship, which they are not expected to rule on. And also this current case that focuses on the power of judges to block presidential policies through nationwide injunctions. I don't know why judges would have any say on presidential policies. I just don't. I really don't. And especially at the district court level. If the president is determined to operate outside of his Article 2 powers, then maybe that is something that we should see only brought in front of the Supreme Court. And if they're not interested in it, then the answer is it should just stand. And I don't like the way that our system has worked right now. I don't like that we've taken these inferior courts, which are described in Article 3, and acted like all of the courts hold all of the power and that they just have the possibility of being overturned. There's only one court that is specifically mentioned in the Constitution. This has just been my overriding take on this. And, it's not that there's some like huge amount of legal scholarship behind it. It's kind of that common sense revolution you hear Donald Trump talk about. The common sense answer is that there's only one court that is specifically mentioned in the Constitution. It's mentioned in Article 3. We call it the Supreme Court, but it's not named that, by the way. And that court does seem like the only one that would keep in check the highest executive in the land, who now is elected by popular vote, but didn't used to be. You didn't used to have a way to actually directly elect the president, even indirectly with the Electoral College. It used to be even further removed. I wish it was sort of that way still. Maybe we would have less of these people out there losing their minds. I've got this lady. This is like a pretty classic version of an interview done. I didn't interview anybody because I had nobody to hold the camera and watch my back when I was down there. So that was my initial intention. But the folks I was going to meet up with didn't end up showing up, or if they did, they didn't show up with me. This is a classic version of what we saw last night. I'm sure she 100% supports following court rulings as long as they agree with what she has to say. She's scared of the red hats showing up. That may be you.
I'm out here because I heard the red hats were coming. The red hats are coming.
The red hats are coming.
The red hats are coming. So I came out here to mock MAGA.
Okay. So what's the biggest issue that you're concerned about right now in America?
There are so many. My country's being destroyed. I spend a lot of time crying. They are destroying my country.
Who's they? Like who specifically?
MAGA.
All these people?
MAGA.
Do you think it's weird that there's a lot of women and like minorities out here?
Not really. I mean, because I believe that Americans are all equally vulnerable to brainwashing and equally vulnerable to the lies of a felon and a con man. I'm just really sad that there are this many Americans, that there are this weak.
Yeah. Well, you believe Trump's racist, right?
Oh, yeah.
So why would all these brown and black people be out here supporting Trump, do you think?
That's something you'd have to ask them. I don't know. I mean, it's easy for me to stand over here as a white person and say, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's using them. He hates them. I see it as being pretty embarrassing and sad, but they don't obviously see it that way. So
Yeah. What's one thing that he did to black people that like shows that he's racist?
lots of things. I mean, he's bringing back stop and frisk. He's oh God. I mean, his commentary, his words.
What did he say?
What he said when he was at that black journalist dinner. Oh my God, that was the most racist thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I can't.
What did he say?
He was asking the woman to like, you're not being nice enough to me. I mean, it's just the way.
Yeah, whenever I tell people that you're not being very nice, that's how I show how racist I am. Do you notice that there's absolutely no answer that she can't directly answer any of them? And maybe it comes from the same school of thought. Maybe she's a CNN watcher, you know, the so-called left of center folks. Maybe she just believes whatever she's fed. She doesn't seem to have any salient thoughts. She doesn't seem to have any opinions. That is actually pretty widespread, like I said. God forbid you be a propaganda outlet, unless you're the propaganda outlet that I actually like. You know, like this one.
It's about making sure that there is white supremacy in this country. And if we're honest, we will say that. It is about making sure. We will make sure that people who DEI is really all these code words. You used to use woke. I asked you to define what woke meant. You couldn't really define it for me. Tell me what it means again.
Woke ideology is taking extreme views of American culture and trying to tear down America from the inside out and go outside of our cultural norms and invade every corporation, university, and other institutions.
What is DEI?
That's incorrect.
Tell me that's incorrect. But what is DEI? Tell me again.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion, and trying to guarantee outcomes instead of guarantee opportunity.
Trump's cabinet looks like DEI.
I was speaking. If I could just finish.
I do want us to not get off the rails because
she just said we're all white supremacists. We got to address this, don't we?
Saying a whole swath of voters and saying they voted because they're racist or misogynist, not because their pocketbook.
Those were my words, yours, but go ahead.
Okay, but they're
said it was about white supremacy.
I said it was about white
Democrats will keep losing if they.
It devolved from there. What are they talking about? Like, how is this a talking point? Look, it wasn't that long ago that these people were not completely out of their damn minds. You can go back 30 years, you can go back 20 years, and find a reasonable discussion about people in this country saying, look, we love America, we love tolerance, you want to live your own life, we're into that. But you can't come here illegally. You can't break our laws. You can't just do whatever it is that you feel like. And we're not going to make excuses for people that are not our constituents. You know who used to say things like that? Nancy Pelosi. 20 years ago. By the way, she was much more polished. In those 20 years, big decline in her ability to communicate. It's the mouth thing. Like, I think her teeth fit better at that point in time. This is 2005. This is 2005 Nancy Pelosi talking about it. And of course, white supremacy doesn't have to just be about black people, especially that lady who was speaking. Her name was Kara something or other. I guess she runs a podcast. Why is it that people have adopted, women specifically, I guess right now, but there's also men doing it, have adopted this drag queen style makeup? Have you guys noticed this? It's like overly bronzed on the cheekbones. It's overly exaggerated, weird lip stuff. They look exactly like what you expect men dressing like women are. It's very confusing. I can see why there are so many gender confused Gen Zers. You know, young people, because they don't have like a lifetime of experience of looking like, okay, that's what a normal woman looks like. That's what real women look like. That's what a dude dressed up like a woman looks like. That's a woman dressed up like a dude dressed up like a woman. You're now in that world of like, what is that? Tropic Thunder sort of situation. It's a dude playing a dude disguised as another lady. Anyway, here's Nancy Pelosi back when she looked like a regular person too, kind of.
Broken borders. That's an oxymoron. Something we can't tolerate. Borders of their nature, our definition as a nation and our protection as a country. Broken borders, they don't exist. We can't tolerate them. So let's say from the start that we all in this body, and I know I can speak very firmly for the Democrats, support strong border control. And it must be part, and the first part, of any comprehensive immigration reform. It is our obligation as elected officials to keep the American people safe, and our borders are our first line of defense, one of our early lines of defense.
You can see she was in her 60s then, and she was already starting to slip just a little bit, not nearly as wacky as she is today. because she had some like intruding thoughts that made her try to straighten those things out, right? But at least she understood that America was a nation. America was a nation that had its own sovereign borders, that there were a people that lived in America, and those people were the constituents. They were the ones that were supposed to vote. When did we get off the rails where people that run for political office in the United States openly and aggressively promote for foreign powers? I'm talking about Tim Walz, referred to as a failed political candidate or failed presidential, vice presidential candidate on Fox News. But there's a pretty stunning clip that he went out and recorded while talking about all this stuff. And this is in the context of the no kings, which apparently Donald Trump is a king, a lot of no dictators signs, a lot of like MAGA. There were like sort of like Nazi salute effigies of Donald Trump wearing a black MAGA hat and Elon Musk things. There was a lot of like sort of blow up, like a lot of money spent. It did look organic to me, for whatever it's worth. The people out there, I think, are motivated not by being paid protesters. I don't think. They were not professionally made signs. These were people that had made their own signs, a lot of diversity in signs, similar themes. But these people did seem like they were motivated, and maybe it's because they're electing leaders that think that the moral authority of the United States is gone, and that the authority now rests with places like China. I kid you not. This man went out and had a national discussion, someone who was running to be the number 2 in this country a couple of months ago. And he thinks that the United States has essentially ceded the moral authority in the world. You can say a lot of things about the United States. What you can't say is that it's ceded moral authority to China. Not in any meaningful way. Not if you know anything about what goes on in China. I guess unless that you lived in China and have been there many, many times and have been courted by the CCP and seem completely mentally compromised. Let's just give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he's confused because he spent too much time there. Here's jazz hands Tim Walz, who also had kind of a bad weekend when it comes to political optics, considering one of his political appointees is now alleged to have killed Democratic lawmakers in his own state.
We have a recent update for you guys. Failed Democratic presidential candidate and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz was just asked about the strikes in Israel and Iran, and here's what he had to say about it.
Now, who is the voice in the world that can negotiate some type of agreement in this? Who holds the moral authority? Who holds the ability to do that? Because we are not seen as a neutral actor. And we maybe never were. I don't want to tell anybody that. I think there's a lot of people that say you always leaned one way in this. But I think there was at least an attempt to be somewhat of the arbitrator in this. We saw President Carter do it with Begin and Sadat. We've had certain wins along the way that were actually mutually beneficial both ways. Now I ask who that is. And I mean, consistently over and over again, we're going to have to face the reality. It might be the Chinese.
Oh, he sounds wasn't on my bingo card, George P. So
all right, and I don't need to hear the Fox circular couch discussing it, but he legitimately just said it might be the Chinese. Again, I'll give him full credit for maybe he's just really that dumb. But I don't think Tim Walz is that dumb. He spent a lot of time over there, and that's the danger of sending politicians into that space and being co-opted. You know, the Chinese use a lot of soft influence. What a disgusting, bizarre... This is as bad as maybe Bernie Sanders doing his honeymoon in Moscow or St. Petersburg or whatever it was when he was over in the USSR. This is like a love affair with the Chinese Communist Party. Like, that is America's biggest enemy. And to make that argument after, like, just a couple of weeks ago, you were campaigning to be vice president and one heartbeat away from the presidency. Truly, truly nasty. So maybe that explains, if that's what the leadership is, then that's how the people are going to end up following. If that guy represents any degree of what the Democrat Party is about, then maybe that's why they're so out of touch with reality. I got a bunch of other weird things to do. We're going to get into the political violence that happened in Minnesota. We're going to talk about that in light of the sort of No Kings rally. So we'll do that for the second half here. Before we do, I'm going to go ahead and remind you guys that my friends at Silent are a good way that you could protect yourself from big tech and government and corporate America and criminals and other scumbaggery. Your privacy is constantly under attack, whether you know it or not. It can be compromised 24/7. If you want to protect yourself, you could start with a bag from Silent. I've actually got their E3 everyday backpack coming in right now. This is one of the phone sleeves. I carried the dry bag with me when I was at that protest. You never know when you might need to slip off the grid and put your GPS away and just not be trackable in the world. You guys kind of get what I'm saying? You know, like something goes down and you don't want to be associated with it, so you want to just pocket those electronics and go off grid. Their Faraday products are going to block all incoming and outgoing signals, and that means all tracking of your phone, all GPS signal, all Wi-Fi, and so on. No one's going to be able to see digitally that you were there. So then you just have to worry about security cameras and, sort of snitches and informants and so on. This is a technology that we use when we were trying to run sources, especially even against nation state actors. Most of them are made in Chinese and garbage. These ones actually work, and they've been confirmed by a lot of different people, including government contracts. So check them out. Their backpacks, their phone sleeves, they all have patented signal blocking technology. It stops your wireless signal, which gives you peace of mind that your data's not going in the wrong hands. It's not giving out your location. And you guys can also get them in dry bags. So if you're worried about weather and things like that, it will keep you from unauthorized access over the air. Go silent at slnt.com/Kyle. Again, it's slnt.com/Kyle. More and more of you guys are looking into it. I'm probably going to make another video about where I use mine. It's actually one of those things, kind of like a cooler that you don't think about carrying it in the back of your car for your groceries. There is an everyday purpose for having these, even if it's just at the dinner table or when you sit down for a meeting and you don't want your phone to interrupt and to be rude to a client. Having this technology to slide it in there instead of having to turn things off and think about it, if you make it part of your life, you will in fact benefit from the privacy and then also just from the silence of your phone not going off. slnt.com/Kyle, 15% off. You'll get free shipping on qualified orders. Let's get into the weirdest part of this weekend, which was this story. I put out a video on this guy that I found, or one of you responded and showed it on the thread, and we ended up having 4 million views of this bizarre story about a Minnesota shooting suspect. I'm going to read his name here. His name is allegedly, we don't know that he obviously hasn't been caught yet, but his name is Vance Belcher, supposedly an outspoken evangelical Christian. Well, this is the story that CNN is going to spin it as. The man is sought for shooting Democratic lawmakers on Saturday while impersonating a police officer and working for a security company that advertised a fleet of police-type vehicles and other equipment that could have aided him in appearing to be law enforcement. What you're seeing on the screen is a mask supposedly worn by this man, a tactical vest, a large flashlight. Apparently, he broke in, killed 2, and then broke in and wounded 2 more who look like they're going to survive. But of course, he was an outspoken evangelical Christian. Found in his vehicle were flyers that said, "No kings." Yes, I'm aware he was caught, folks, in the chat. People are freaking out. Like, I understand. I'm just telling you where it started. Everything about this story was wrong. None of it made any bit of sense to me when I listened to it. It's all weird. It's wacky. Here was the video that we got early on. I started having sources in law enforcement in Minnesota reaching out to me and sharing, this is the subject's name, before it broke public. I didn't want to go public with that information because I'm not trying to break stories, and I'm also not trying to hinder their ability to catch him. It ended up taking hours and hours before they were able to round this guy up. They didn't catch him until yesterday. This is a video that we found, or that was posted on my thread, of him introducing himself. And then you start reading about this guy's background. And apparently not only did he run a nonprofit and a security company in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which if you don't understand what that means, if you're working security as an American who owns a security or runs a security organization in another country, you have someone that has approached you from what's called the CIA's National Resource Group. NR is the group of domestically based CIA case officers that goes out and talks to and recruits Americans that travel abroad that might be in a position to provide good either information or access to information for the CIA. Was he brainwashed or any of that stuff? I don't know. But all of the background of this guy indicates to me that he would at least had a passing familiarity with the United States intelligence community, if not CIA, then DIA. If there are people that are operating in the munitions, in food distribution, in access to governments and other nonprofits, you 100% are at least a target of what our intelligence community goes out to recruit. Because they want people that have a plausible reason to be there, that are going to go out and engage with local and state and federal officials in the areas they go in, and they can do so under deniable cover that does not officially represent U.S. interests. This guy's bizarre. So we'll listen to him. He also apparently worked at a freaking mortuary, and he was involved in like funeral homes and body processing and picking up crimes. Everything about this is crazy. Supposedly has 5 kids. Like, anyway, listen to the story.
Hello, my name is Vance Belter. I just go by Vance. No other names that I use. I live in Grinnell, Minnesota, about an hour away from the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. I'm affiliated with 2 funeral homes. I work full-time for Wolf Funeral Home, which is an intake location for about 6 funeral homes. And we also do all the intake for the National Cremation Society and the Neptune Society for all their cremation customers as well. So I mainly do removals at this point. So I work at Wolf full time, and then I also work for another funeral home called Metro First Call, and they also do traditional removals at nursing homes, assisted living apartments, but they also have contracts with medical examiner's office. So like one contract is the Hennepin County Medical Examiner's Office. So we'll do removals, which we're working with a lot of police officers and death investigators at the location where a decedent is found. Could be a crime scene or just a natural death. And our role is to just take the decedent from that place of death to the medical examiner's office in the middle and the center there. And was asked a couple years ago to go and see what I could do for ideas on helping their food supply system. Their population is about 100 million people, and they import 80% of their food currently. So some of the food companies I worked for in the past were Farm to Fork, like Del Monte Foods and Golden Plump Poultry, where we did everything from, at Del Monte, we planted the products to harvested them to process them and then shipped them out. In Golden Plump Poultry, we had our...
Anyway, if you guys want to find the video's over on my X stream. You guys can find that in the timeline. It's pretty easy to see. He's talking there about some work that he did in the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's videos of him going up and doing some preaching where he's standing up and preaching the word. And all of that seems really strange. And you notice he makes no reference to anything related to security, even though supposedly he was part of a group called Red Lion, which was a security company that had money coming in from the U.S. government and is no longer functional. So apparently lost like either U.S. aid money or similar overseas stuff. What a weird, everything about it. If you go look at his LinkedIn, which was popping up all over the place, his LinkedIn profile said that he was a general manager at a 7-Eleven, that he'd worked for Del Monte Foods, which he just referenced there, a couple of other different food suppliers, Nestle, and so on. Not the background of a guy that you'd expect to snap and go on the run and kill people, but go figure. That is what we're talking about. This is the story that comes from ABC. This was updated this morning. It says that he's due in court because he was obviously caught yesterday. State Representatives Melissa Hordman and her husband Mark were killed in their homes. There were additional shootings that happened across town, which is where he was supposedly in the act of breaking into the home, was shot at, returned fire to the cops, still made it in, then was able to shoot 2 more. He was able to shoot Senator, what's his name? State Senator, is that right? Give me 1 second here. John Hoffman and his spouse, both of whom are expected to survive, as far as I can tell right now. He was on the run for about 43 hours after the shooting and was arrested last night sometime. He was also appointed in 2019 to a governor's board about like economic development or business development in the state of Minnesota by Tim Walz. So all of that's really strange. The same Tim Walz that thinks that everything is going to be fine because the Chinese are the moral authority. We're talking about some really, really odd, weird, unusual, and just like otherwise unexplainable backgrounds. Again, if you go and dig into this thing, it looks like he lived about 6 different lives. We've got a video I'll play in just a second from supposedly his roommate. I guess his marriage was on the rocks and he was on the outs with that. Roommate seems like a complete wacko. Might be lying about everything, like no real clear thing. At least there's the sane voices of MSNBC to try to help calm people down in this time of turmoil and say that the political violence that is going on, which, you know, by all accounts, I don't know what this guy identifies as. When you look at his background, it's not clear. And by the way, anybody that's reporting that he was a registered Republican does not understand how Minnesota works. If you watch Sarah Field's reporting, it's very clear that when you register in the state of Minnesota, you do not register as a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, you simply register to vote. And they have open primaries, which means you could vote in any. And oftentimes, people who lean towards the Democratic side will very frequently vote in a Republican primary in order to get a weaker candidate that is less conservative. That's a common thing. It happens in all the different states. By the way, the same thing happens in places like Massachusetts. The same thing happens like places like New York, where New Yorkers know that their vote's not going to help in the Republican primary. So maybe they go after the other. They'll go and try to vote for like a more left of center, center centrist type moderate Democrat. That's the thing that gets done. In any case, it's all Trump's fault that this is violent. It's all Trump's fault that there is political animosity, even though there's a really high probability. Like, we're talking about Democrat lawmakers who just signed and sided with Republicans and helped pass something which was removing unlimited free healthcare from illegal aliens in Minnesota, which seems like a thing that any no-brainer could go behind. Anyway, this is the former mayor of New York City, de Blasio, saying that it's Trump's fault.
Does seem to have skyrocketed. What do you think it would take to de-escalate, to get, whether it's politicians or media outlets that benefit from the escalation, from increasing conflict, to cool the temperatures?
Catherine, it's a powerful question. I think the first thing we have to think about, quick context. I mean, this is very troubling, but if you compare it to the USA in 1968, when we had assassinations of some of the most important figures in our society, and we had constant conflict and violence in cities all over the country, we're in a bad place, but we've been to a much worse place. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. I think the first thing we need to do is have our leaders take the temperature down. We're not expecting to see that from President Trump. Unfortunately, he has more than anyone given the permission structure for this reality. And even what we've seen in the last week in Los Angeles, sparked by a kind of state violence, by ICE being extremely aggressive in their approach to immigration enforcement, that created a response from protesters, most of them peaceful. And then, of course, we saw some who were not peaceful. And I want to emphasize that's not acceptable. Protesters being violent is not acceptable either. But there's a cycle here of the most important leadership in the country, both in the words he uses and the actions he's authorizing, creating an environment that's becoming more violent, more conflictual. I don't expect him to change. I do think we can call upon people in the Republican Party to start finding their consciences and take the temperature down in a meaningful way.
Mayor de Blasio, the U.S. Capitol Police reported 9,400 investigated.
We need to de-escalate, okay? And here's the thing. If you're a law enforcement officer and you're doing the job of law enforcement and you're just arresting people on authorized warrants that you're charged with doing, and you have the legal authority to do so under the executive, because that's the way that our system works. And even Nancy Pelosi would agree that borders matter. At least 20 years ago, Nancy would. Can you just please do it in a de-escalated way? Can you please stop provoking all of these protesters? Here's some really peaceful people just getting in the face of cops. Kudos to these cops. This, I believe, is in Charlotte, North Carolina. They're just standing there listening while you hear a lecture from, again, that special group of people. It's either going to be boomers, 60 to 80, broadly speaking, or Zoomers, 15, let's say, to 28. I think it's 13 to 28 is the actual thing, but I don't think there's any 13-year-olds out there. This guy looks like he's in his early 20s, and he's going to just scream at a cop. Remember, it's your job to de-escalate when someone yells in your face because they're an a-hole. This is what they're asking for. Remember, this is the cop's fault for even being there.
De-escalate. That's your word. De-escalate. Do you understand that word? De-escalate. You get that? You don't hit women. Why cops punch my girlfriend in the face?
Why did cops punch my girlfriend in the face? This guy's standing there like, who is this kid? Why are they like this? Maybe because the people they elect go in and say dumb things like this. This happened in Los Angeles. This was a city council meeting where a city councilwoman asked the chief of police, can you give us warning, maybe with AI, she sounds brilliant. Can you give us warning about when federal enforcement actions are going to happen so that we can subvert this federal law, that we can engage in illegal obstruction? Would you, as police chief, be willing to do that? And thank God the police chief looks at her like she's got like, something growing out of her forehead that doesn't belong there. Maybe a male phallic device. Enjoy this moment. These people are the worst. And she's also pretty young from what I can tell. I can't tell how old she is. Maybe she's in her 30s, but she might not be. I couldn't get a name on this lady. Listen to the stupidity. And it's giving me, and I know she's sort of Hispanic looking, but she could be Italian as well. It's giving me this thing that I'm going to start calling white woman fatigue or white lady fatigue. Why is it always the white ladies that are like this? And yes, she might be Hispanic, but she would fall into white Hispanic as far as I can tell. Here she is asking for this guy to break federal law.
Can we use technology like AI technology to create a situation where your department can identify, hey, there's agents, non-city of LA, in a neighboring town. Everyone go on alert in a way where you can support our business community and our immigrant community to know that it's time. That's something related to the lack of due process, the lack of warrants is about to hit our town. I'm asking creativity question here. What can your department do to do more to warn us, to warn the business community that outside of our LA borders, coming in from Inglewood, coming in from Antelope Valley, I don't know, you can warn us so that we can warn our folks in the spirit of your loyalty to the city of Los Angeles?
So you're asking me to warn you about an enforcement action being taken by another agency before it happens?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't do that.
Why not?
That would be obstruction of justice. You may want to talk to the city attorney about that.
Why not? Why can't you do that? Because it's illegal, lady. Because that's not what law enforcement, like, it's bad enough that you say that they can't cooperate with, but you certainly cannot thwart the efforts of federal law enforcement. And by the way, we're not talking about 30,000. We're not talking about 3,000. We're talking about like 30 people getting rounded up on any one of these raids and a couple hundred on any given day. Best case scenario. The Trump administration is not even doing as much as it could be doing. The so-called mass, protests or the mass, like deportations. They're not happening in this country at this point. They're just not. I love that you guys said maybe her last name is Padilla. Maybe it is. I don't know. If you guys actually have a definitive name on who she was, I would love to look up. I'll do a little profile in here tomorrow when I look a little deeper. She's got the same energy. And by the way, she had like some significant cleavage going on. I don't know if that's like normal in Los Angeles for you to have like a city councilwoman who wants to show off like a deep V cut, but good on her, I guess. It makes it somewhat tolerable to watch. And then there's this lady, which is another white lady that I'm fatigued with. This is the alternative to that. So you have young and prettier, then you have old and whatever this haircut is that they all seem to get. At some point in time, like boomer women are issued this haircut, and right when they are, I don't want to hear what they have to say anymore. I've actually developed this idea that I think whenever they start talking, you should just do an about face and forward march away. Just march in the opposite direction. Don't even explain it. Just this kind of lecture, there's no reason for you to subject yourself to it. Unless you're listening to our show, in which case you're going to find out that all the gardeners at all the farmers markets are shut down in my beautiful city of Los Angeles. Remember, she said, show your loyalty to Los Angeles. Here's another lady who apparently has loyalty to Los Angeles, whatever the hell that means. You can kind of smell the litter box from here. Enjoy this clip.
So I'm in my beautiful city, LA, and I have friends texting me like all morning. My gardener didn't show up. My housekeeper didn't show up. My farmer's market was closed. Everyone's scared. Well, this is not going to just happen in LA. And you 1%ers that only voted for Trump because of money? Guess what? You're going to have to do your own dishes or clean your own house or mow your own lawn. And that wonderful produce, the organic produce you get for your brunches? All gone. Yeah, you're going to actually have to do some work around your house. These people are important.
These people are slaves, apparently. That's the attitude that will... Did she also take voice lessons from the woman who did the Wicked Witch of the West? She's like, I'm gonna get you, my pretty. Like, where do you make that noise from your face like that? It's awful. And apparently, the reason we need to have illegal aliens here is to pick the crops, Nancy Pelosi style, to do the dishes. By the way, that's a teenager job. I used to very much appreciate hiring teenagers to come in and bust their ass in a restaurant to wash dishes. Do you know why? They take instruction, they speak English, that's all really, really helpful. They're trying to learn job skills and they want something else. And they actually have the ability to earn another job. They're getting valuable experience and they're getting time. The biggest thing you do when you're a teenager, 15, 16, 17 years old, that I guess is not happening because illegals are taking the jobs. The biggest reason that you got a fast food job when you were a kid, it's not because you were making money. That's what your parents told you were doing. You were learning how to take instruction and work in a system that wasn't yours and wasn't your home's. And the people who worked there didn't love you. They were just random people. And you had to figure out how to get along. And you had to show up on time. And you had to be there and do a task that you probably didn't want to do. And the reward for that task you didn't enjoy doing was compensation. But what you also got to see was that there was an opportunity to do something better. You were in a system and you're like, dang, I'm washing dishes. It's hot, sweaty, gross. My fingers hurt. There's like spraying hot water. I smell like, like a trash can. But then there's a person who's working behind the bar and they're bringing home like $300 in tips every night. And they get to go talk to pretty girls and nice looking men and people are giving them money and they get to pour beers. That seems way better than spraying hot water on dishes. Oh, how about that? You actually learn a skill set and you see that there are better options out there. And so you go like, I don't want to wash dishes for my whole life. I'm going to get an education, maybe. I'm going to show up on time and build a resume so that when I go apply for the next thing, they can call my boss up and go, hey, does Andrew show up for work on time? And then a guy like me picks up the phone and goes, absolutely. That guy was my hardest worker. Whatever he wants to do, he can do. And they go, awesome. And then they hire Andrew to go do the next job. There's another talking point being marched out by these crazy white ladies. And like it's almost exclusively crazy white ladies. Less than 10% of immigrants taken into ICE custody since October have had serious criminal convictions, the data shows. This is a CNN piece. Now we've moved that we only want to get rid of the people that are involved in like serious crimes. You know, the ones we really care about, like murder and rape and assault. And they have to show convictions for that. Do you know how many people are involved in serious crimes that are not charged? Tons of them. Most gang members. A lot of gang members, especially the ones that are really successful, they're the ones ordering hits. They got involved in them and they worked their way up the game because they weren't dumb and they didn't get caught. So the guys that we would grab in the MS-13 rings, they'd be in their mid-20s, late 20s. They'd be the oldest guy in the gang and they'd been managed to do all kinds of crazy violence and never have a criminal record. That's why they were the senior guy. They're the ones who could actually go out and open a bank account because they didn't have those convictions, because they could show their face in public and get away with some of this stuff. Less than 10% of immigrants. How about this? The 1325 felony that Border Patrol charges all the time is a felony. So why do we get to decide whether or not this thing, they keep making this argument, oh, these are just civil infractions. This is the talking point that's being marched out, and it's going to low information people. Here, I'll show you what those people look like. They look like this. This is some footage of me being on the grounds. And by the way, the capital of Texas has absolutely beautiful grounds. Look at it. This is thousands and thousands of people who showed up to protest something that have the same ideology as them, but they don't have any facts. They're worried about the 10% of like serious criminals. And yet all of the people that are here illegally are taking opportunities from their kids. There's an awful lot of white people at this rally, by the way, almost exclusively. They're all virtue signaling. They're all talking about the things that are most important to them. They're showing a ton of like alternative sexuality, as I mentioned. It's nonstop. These people, like, they don't have any skin in this game. And so their real problem is that they hate Donald Trump. And the reason they hate Donald Trump is because they have been paying attention to mainstream media broadcasts that have overwhelmingly told them that it's dangerous, that there's a bunch of like reasons to be fearful, that the folks who attend Trump rallies are mean and scary and dangerous and they're making the country less safe. They're listening to the Ginger Goebbels types, the Jen Psaki's, the Chris Hayes, and the MSNBC crew. Like, these people could be your neighbors. And they probably live among you. That's the craziest thing. There was a lot of traffic on the way down there. What you didn't see was tons of like, I don't know, illegal aliens that were out there protesting. You saw a bunch of people whose parents were actually legally here. And that's why but they now have a cause. And so they got to come out and hear. I'll post all this stuff over on Locals for whatever it's worth, folks. I probably have about 40 minutes worth of crowd footage. And you can just kind of see some of the, if you wanted to see what it was like, and you're not the kind of person that wants to go into a crowd like this, which I don't blame you. It's not very cool. Somebody was saying that the stench of BO and patchouli and weed was giving them a headache. I saw that happen. This is south of the Capitol on Congress Street. This is specifically in Austin. It was very, very polite for the most part, but you can see everybody's marching and has nothing to do with immigrants or anything else. It just has to do with how do we resist what's going on. They blocked off streets all the way south for blocks below. And then, of course, it got a little bit stupid and some property violence happened. There's one guy that's in this little clip right there that was being a jerk. That guy in the red bandana tried to get in my face, which was kind of funny. But we just walked on. For the most part, it was just like organically organized people with mental illness. And it looks like the same mental illness that you see on MSNBC every day. Here's Jen Psaki talking about the other thing that happened this weekend, which was a big parade in honor of the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army, the 250th birthday of the U.S. Army. And these people are shocked that it wasn't as dark or dangerous or ominous as it could be.
One thing I will say, I want to go back to you, Ali, that again, when we talk about this sort of tension in the country, and sometimes, you know, you and I have both been at Trump rallies, those can be, you know, very tense, a kind of, I would say, like kind of a dark, malevolent energy sometimes in them. Not always, but it doesn't seem like that's the energy on the mall today, which I think is a good sign, right?
Correct. That you're really correct about that, Chris, and it's something we were watching for. Yeah. I'm just sort of surprised by the number of people who were at the front of the parade, watching, cheering, and then would come and ask to take a selfie. Yeah, right. This is a very different mood here. Yeah. People seem to be going out of their way to say that they're here to celebrate the Army's 250th birthday. Now, there are people walking around with signs. A moment ago, while you were talking to Jen, a guy just came around and said, Trump 2028. And I said, how does that work exactly? And he's like laughing and had a big flag on him. So there's some politicization here, but it is not, it's not dark. It's not tense. It's not amped up. It's different. It's different from covering a Trump rally.
No, it's exactly like a Trump rally. We've sent people like Martin Auden into Trump rallies. That's what they're like. You guys have seen footage of them. They're generally positive. There's a lot of people that celebrate and love this country, and they love Donald Trump for whatever reasons. People have different reasons for loving him. They like things about him that may or may not be true. It's completely irrelevant. It's a upbeat mood. And then you go into these leftist protests. And how do you know? Well, guess what? I was in Portland in 2020. I was in Washington, D.C. in 2020. I had friends that were in Minneapolis and Chicago, that were in Dallas, that were in all these major cities, in Atlanta. We watched the malevolence, and it exists, this undercurrent of potential violence, because so many people are upset about things that are not true. And their view of what happens in reality doesn't jibe with the actual reality that they live in. And so they end up getting very dangerous and really nuts. Imagine being shocked that a parade in the United States showing the military of the United States on its 250th birthday, was surprising to you that nobody was violent. And a guy carrying a Trump 2028, and that's politicization? That's trolling you. That's what that looks like. These people have lost the thread. Again, it's the same people that are saying that it must be about white supremacy. Here's that Ali Veshy guy again talking about it. And then we're going to go into what happened in Salt Lake City, which is even crazier. And I had no idea how left-leaning Salt Lake City is, but like every urban area, they seem captured by these folks. Here's a quick little take about that parade again. And it's offensive to, of course, it's going to be an Air Force veteran. You can't make it up. They found some Air Force vet who's going to be some simping leftist.
By the overwhelming majority of Americans, regardless of political party and regardless of who the subject of the assassination is. That's a very red line that'll be crossed. And I wonder if some of these protests around the country, including yours, whether that's a unifying force, where people are going to come out and say, we want our democracy a certain way. We have the right to protest. It's a First Amendment right. We don't cross lines into political violence.
Yeah, I would hope so. I would hope that this is a unifying moment, but unfortunately, as we've seen time and time again, it usually isn't. We have too many people and too many elected officials, including the current occupant of the White House, who escalates rhetoric and violent rhetoric against political opponents. And that leads to these kinds of tragic events. It is absolutely unacceptable, and every single elected official should be condemning this, regardless of their political party. But I don't have the greatest hope for some people to actually come out and do that.
Yeah. Donald Trump is totally not going to go out there and be mean to people. We're talking about the guy that got shot, right? And then had another assassination attempt afterwards, the guy that got shot in the head. That guy, he's not going to condemn political violence. We're talking about if you go back and look at like escalating political violence, and I've got a little story here from ABC, and all the examples of like legitimately terrifying political violence, the folks that were killed or were attacked are on the right. Like, like the 2017 congressional baseball shooting. This is insane. Like it's a complete alternate backwards reality. This is the story from Salt Lake City at the No Kings rally there. Again, I'm glad that I went to the one that didn't get this rowdy. But this could happen anywhere. Apparently the turnout was very big there. In Austin, it was somewhere between like 3,000 and 8,000, hard to say, but across the entire spectrum of it. And the people that got rowdy, I would say, were numbering in the 200 to 400 range. So I wanted to go down there specifically to have my own impressions and then not be able to have to rely on what the news media said it was. It gave me one little insight. This story is tragic. An innocent bystander, someone named Arthur Falasco Alu, 39. I don't know what Falasco Alu, I don't know what kind of name that is, but it's kind of interesting. 39 of Utah died in a hospital in Salt Lake City. He was hit, but he was not the intended target of the gunfire. He was a bystander that was killed when a bystander decided to intervene on a guy named Arturo Gamboa, who was 24 years old, who pulled out a rifle. And so-called peacekeeping teams that were deployed there. No clue about the political ideology here, so I'm not going to speculate. But the folks that were at this rally, apparently they had peacekeeping forces. I saw a lot of those in Austin. They were like medics. They were street medics. They were all Antifa type nonsense, right? Those quote unquote peacekeeping teams opened fire at this guy, Arturo Gamboa, who drew an AR style rifle and didn't hit him, although they looked like he actually got wounded, like a little tiny abdominal wound, like maybe just above his left iliac crest. He took like a little, like a grazing wound. They accidentally killed somebody who was an unintended person somewhere in the background. Again, when you go to start shooting and you go to start defending people, you better know the classic safety rules. And one of them is know your target, know your backstop. What's behind what you're shooting at? So people who don't know how to shoot weapons, who don't understand the liability. Actually, the Israelis used to train dropping to a knee in aircraft so that everybody that was near the subject, whatever was going on, whatever your target was, it would miss up. So you wouldn't actually hit anybody in the crowd. It's actually not a bad tactic. It gives you a bad angle to shoot at. But if you can get above or below your subject, you'll shoot, and the way that your bullet won't actually end up in some innocent bystander and kill some 39-year-old guy who had no business being shot. It had nothing to do with it. In any case, all of that story is kind of wild. There's another story that came out of Alexandria and out of Virginia. There was a No Kings protest that was south of D.C., and apparently some 20-something ran his vehicle into it. But no idea whether or not it was politically motivated or not. There's no reason. We don't even know why that guy had the AR or why people started shooting at him, whether he was actually going to be a mass shooter, if that was his goal, whether he was there because he wanted to protect himself and he was part of one of these peacekeeping teams. So a lot of unknowns in that story. It does let you know that when you're in a crowd full of clowns, you're going to be in a place where you got to be like sort of hoping that everyone around you doesn't act like a fool, and be aware. So another reason not to go down there. And the last reason not to go down there is so you don't have to listen to stuff like this. This is another kind of useful story from the weekend. There's a woman named Randy Weingartner, who many of us became disgusted with during the COVID stuff. Sometimes these things all come back together. And Randy was also a prominent figure in the Democratic Party. She was working for the DNC, and apparently over a leadership dispute, she quit. Let me give you a little bit of a little taste of what she was doing in Philadelphia, and then I'll show you what was going on outside of listening to her voice. It turns out listening to unhinged, leftist, angry white ladies might make you want to go fight with cops. Who would get riled up by this? Maybe people who just don't ever want to hear this again, and they'd rather be in jail than have to listen to this woman rant. This is the angry, communistic, lesbian teachers union head, Randy Weingartner, screaming at a microphone that's too far away from her face, and she has to jump up on a trampoline to talk into.
You are the community to this president's chaos. And together, we build a future of opportunity and justice for all. Hope over fear, aspiration over anger, the promise of America for each and every American. That is what we are fighting for today.
I don't know who told her that was really inspirational, but it's really awful. It makes me want to go fight with a cop. So let's go fight with cops who have bicycles. So, you know, like if you listen to that and it gets you riled up, then maybe you want to go pick a fight with a couple of cops. Last little story that came out as the sort of chaos that was unfolding up in Minnesota was happening. We had more aggressive rhetoric and nonsense coming from the Attorney General of Minnesota, a guy named Keith Ellison. He decided to get out and talk about, you know, it's Donald Trump's fault, even though his friends were just killed with this like really strange background guy. And this was while the guy was still at large. He seemed really comfortable out there, like making this. Look at the people in the background of this video clip, by the way. I saw an awful lot of that. Imagine being the Attorney General of a state, even a state as stupid as Minnesota is right now, and having people in the background wearing high visibility vests and beanies that say ACAB, which stands for All Cops Are Bastards. That's an interesting take for the top law enforcement guy in the country to have them in the backdrop while he's speaking like this. This is at the Women's March, AFL-CIO, Minnesota, the Indivisible Twin Cities nonsense thing, 501 something.
We owe it to them. We have to do it. We must be there on behalf of the people of this country in this hour when a dictator who wants to be a king is trying to run over the rights of the people. We must be there. We must stand up. We must be strong. We cannot waver. We will not be intimidated. We are not scared of his jail. We are not scared of anything about this guy. We are not afraid, and we will not let fear rule the day. We will not let him weaponize fear against us. And I'm telling you now that he had his goons arrest a senator when he was just trying to ask a question. Senator Padilla wrongfully treated.
Yeah, Senator Padilla wrongfully treated. I got one more little clip of that weird roommate, which I forgot I was going to show you guys, so I will show you that. But let's just do this story real quick, because this actually does have a broader implication. So Senator Padilla was arrested briefly. He was detained, and he decided to go make the circuit. So he's probably pissed. This is a CBS story. He says he warns about what happens, quote, when cameras are not there after he was removed from that Kristi Noem event, which we shared the nonsense of it. Thing number one. He probably had this really great political stunt in mind, and that was completely overshadowed by some wild news that happened over the weekend, and Iran and Israel getting into an armed conflict and sending bombs back and forth. So completely dismantled his ability to go and do the talk circuit. So he managed to be on CBS Face the Nation. That was his thing. And he says, don't just imagine what they're capable of, but you can figure out what they'll do when the cameras are not there. If that's how this administration responds to a senator with a question, don't just imagine what they're capable of, but imagine what they're doing when the cameras are not there and the people without a title, like U.S. Senator, are facing cruel and disrespectful treatment. So many people deserve so much better. All right, so that was what he had to say. There actually is an interesting little argument. I'm going to cut a different way. When I was at this rally that was going on at the state capitol in Texas, I was unable to live stream. Some of you guys saw that we set up a live stream. I put the work in to put a thumbnail together, and I set it all up, and I got all the stream keys uploaded, and I was prepared to go and stream from the phones and send you guys a signal so you could see this live, because I wanted to be able to do that. And with a live stream comes a little bit of protection, makes it easier to go out and start asking questions of folks, perhaps. But there was no ability of me to project my signal because the state police, who were concerned about either terrorism or other potential violent attacks, and they completely shut down cell service in the area. Which means that even though the cameras were rolling, they weren't rolling in real time, and you couldn't broadcast from there. For me, that actually is a real problem, and we probably need to start having that discussion in this country. Because all of our interest in freedom and in making sure that we don't have like terrorists coming in and taking advantage of these events, you also have to be able to spread that word. And there should be a First Amendment ability to broadcast for like an independent streamer like me. If I want to go down there and show people in real time what's going on, I wasn't able to do that. And to me, that actually is a real liability. And I understand that there's a security concern, but we have to be able to balance our ability to have First Amendment protected liberties and be able to show people with freedom of the press and that state ability to like make sure that someone doesn't, like, are there any examples of people using cell phones to set off bombs in the United States right now? It's just not something that happens at a very high level. It doesn't happen very frequently. And wouldn't we expect those people in the FBI that we've been told are keeping us safe, wouldn't they actually have some word that this is going on? At the end of the day, I want to have more freedom than less, and some of that freedom is a little bit dangerous and scary. And yeah, it does seem like a First Amendment issue. By the way, I panned up there because there were multiple drones that were flying on there, and it's not clear to me whether the drones, which were being run by the state police, were involved in doing cell phone blocking or whether they had a big blocker that was parked all around. But we had no ability to do it. The minute I got out of the state grounds, I was able to do it, but I was too far away from the protest to be able to share this stuff. So some of this stuff is real problematic. And that means that, yeah, imagine what happens when the cameras are not there. The cameras actually should be there for everybody's protection in all directions. So I actually tend to agree, but I don't think that his publicity stunt was the thing that he thought it was. All right, we got one more. This is not funny, but this is weird. This is the supposedly the roommate of the shooting suspect. This guy, Vance Bolter, apparently lived with this guy who sounds crazy and strange. And then we'll go into a palate cleanse because we need it after this bizarre sort of warm up. And it has nothing to do with politics, so you guys could just laugh. It's just a good clip of Shane McGillis doing something funny. Here's the this is still a developing story, and I think whatever we hear in the middle of this investigation, I hope it doesn't go the way of like that Ryan Routh guy who was down outside of Trump's golf course. But a lot of the strange stories we're hearing about this guy, they don't add up. They make less sense than my backstory. And my backstory is convoluted to the point where my friends think I've lived multiple lives. Listen to this guy talking about his buddy's job was carving out eyeballs. I don't even know. I can't tell if he's just like screwing with these people and trolling them, or if he's just a nut, and that's the kind of guy that this guy hung out with. So here we go.
No, because he was on call for work, and he'd always say, "Yeah, I need rest for work, so I'm sharp." Because he was extracting eyeballs, so you gotta be sharp for that.
I remember him walking out of the house, or hearing him walking out or anything like that.
Nope.
Was it unusual for him to go to bed at 7 p.m.? I mean, when you say...
Well, it depends on the shift, no, because he is working all kinds of hours. Didn't seem odd, no.
Did he give you any emotional message, said that he loves you, besides the text messages or something like that? Has he...
Well, he said that he made some choices. And he said, "You guys don't know anything about it," but yeah. So that's what he said. He didn't have much time to live.
Another big ask. Do you mind if I take a picture of the text message?
Nah,
You can block out his number.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I kind of keep that private because I read it to people, and I don't know. I just got to get going. I have to.
Is his phone still ringing when you called?
No, it's.
Go straight to voicemail?
Yeah, just voicemail. I can't, he doesn't want me involved.
Yeah.
Everything about that is weird. The guy's doing a bunch of like discrediting where he's saying things and shaking his head as a no. He's also out of breath for no particular reason, just standing there. He's letting the news reporters ask questions, and then those people are not waiting for him to answer them. He's answering back once they fill in the answer. All that stuff is super strange. He's got some strange smirks, so a lot of body language, strange stuff in there. Anyway, everything about that is strange. And then you've got the last little piece here, which we'll wrap up with just ABC News. Their conclusion is that lawmaker shootings in Minnesota have represented a disturbing trend. This is their analysis. Violence has expanded in scope in recent years. And of course, the violence they're talking about, recent assassination attempts of President Trump in 2024, a 2011 assassination attempt on Gabby Giffords, which was completely, I guess that's part of the story here. The trend is further highlighted in 2017, the congressional baseball practice in Alexandria, Virginia. They had to get the Gabby Giffords thing in. You have to go back to 2011 to find some example of somebody on the political right, apparently, or just a wacko going after somebody on the left because they needed to be able to do that. They have a Secret Service study, which goes back to 2015, so pre-Trump era, again, examining the attacks against federal government, shedding light on its perpetrators. It found that the offenders choose their targets for reasons including retaliation, furtherance of political ideologies, personal gain, or seeking fame and attention. Shocker. Basically all the things that people do right now. Nearly half of the offenders exhibited evidence of a fixation, an intense or obsessive preoccupation with an individual, an activity, or like one of these types of people who sounds like...
I'm out here because I heard the Red Hats were coming. The Red Hats are coming! The Red Hats are coming!
Yeah, an intense or obsessive preoccupation with individual activity or idea. You know, like all the people that were out there carrying signs about dictators, even though the fact that we don't live in a dictatorship, in a monarchy, I don't see any evidence that Donald Trump wants to become a king. And if you want to go back and find the only person, the closest person to a dictator or king in the entire history of the United States, you can do it. And he was a Democrat called FDR. I guess people forget that. The guy had to be killed. He had to die in office to be able to not be in power. because he was willing to do it forever because he thought his ideas were the best. It is kind of unique. In any case, some domestic violent extremists will likely hold a wide range of targets that are directly or indirectly associated with elections as viable targets for violence with the intent of instilling fear in voters and candidates and election workers, as well as disrupting the election process coming up into November. That was the threat assessment done by DHS in 2024 under Biden. Again, that DVE, that means me. And that means you, if you listen to this, if you do not actually assign yourself to the status quo of whatever you're allowed to do, then you're the real problem here. And they always call you domestic violent extremists, even though you don't have to have any extreme beliefs, even though you don't have to have anything violent in your history or in your tactics. It's a really, really, really bad analytical piece. And it's quite short. They have no conclusions. There's no actual objective analysis, and there's actually no information here. They cherry-picked a couple of things. Calling that analysis is pretty sad, but it was written by a guy who's a retired Secret Service agent, so we have that to go for. Anyhow, all we know, we got to distrust the mainstream media every single time, and we should also just be skeptics in general. Let's do some Shane McGillis and get the hell out of here today. Let's do that now. Something about nothing related to any of these things. Here's something about the Special Olympics, which was, he's right, this is the kind of analysis I want. You know, semi-humorous, but also biting.
We're all adults. We all agree the Special Olympics is a good program. It's great. I just feel like the guy who came up with it had to be like a real risk taker. Some guy in a board meeting, like, I got an idea. We should be racing these motherfuckers. Like, what'd you say? Like, fucking a town over said they had the fastest ones. So we settle it, you know? I'm not making fun of the Olympians. The concept is wild.
He's right. It is kind of a bold concept to go out there. We could do some leftist Olympics, though. There were definitely some people that would have been interesting to watch engage in athletic pursuits down there in Austin. So maybe we'd set those up and do them and pit them against each other. It would be good. Some of those people really needed to get some movement done, and they should probably take off their masks. I can't tell you how many people I saw wearing masks. So I think if you're wearing a mask in 2025 out in the open air, I think you're retarded. I think you're actually qualified for the Special Olympics. So there's that. There's the tie-in for you. All right, folks, thanks so much for joining us today. If you're watching over on Rumble, make sure you give us a like. We appreciate it when you do. It's rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. If you're watching over on YouTube, I think we had a record number for a Monday. We're like 200 plus watching live. That's awesome. Appreciate all of you out there. YouTube.com/@Kyle Seraphin. If you want to share it with your friends, we do appreciate you guys subscribing to the channel and liking it as well. And leave a comment if you guys are so inclined. I read a bunch of them, almost all of them, and I find them to be very interesting. You guys have a lot of interesting perspective. Leave me a question, a comment, or sarcastic remark. You can do so over on Spotify as well at KyleSeraphinShow.com. We'll read. I read all your reviews on there too, and some of them are good and some of them are iffy. So, you know, questions, comments, sarcastic remarks, make sure you do it. We'll catch you again tomorrow at 0930, and we'll see the American Radicals do the same thing tomorrow. Have a great and wonderful day as we start this week and this Monday. God bless you. See you later.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.